own computer, my own laptop, but we had some security issues within my own office right around the end of December, and a lot of things have changed, so when I tried to remote into my desktop, that did not work. So thank you, Norval, for getting us moving along. And thanks for having me here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to you today. And basically what I'm going to do is take you through Valley Engineering's experience with company, with culture, and how important culture has become to our company and how it's played a huge role in really transforming our company throughout the last couple of years. So when you think about what culture is, I actually walked in the room today and somebody said something about culture, and they said, well, we have a picture of the Mona Lisa, and that's not what we're talking about today. Culture, what we're talking about today is basically the I like to refer to it as an ecosystem. So it's the social norms, the values of an organization. It can also be within a family structure. It can be within a church group. So cultures exist everywhere. And even within culture, there can be subcultures. So within a main culture, you may have groups that break off into smaller cliques, per se, that become subcultures of a main culture. So there's lots of different ways to address culture. Specifically with Valley Engineering, we set off in 2014 to really transform our group into a high-performance team. And I created a high-performance leadership program specifically for our group. I attended a conference in Florida and met a person by the name of Chris McGough. He's an author of the book called The Primes. He actually just had another book released last week called Fire in the Root Cellar. And he was speaking at this particular conference. And a group exercise that we participated in at our tables, we went around the room and we had to write down and identify out loud what our main problem was within our own organization, what our biggest hurdle was. So we all went around the table, and when it got to myself, I said that manpower, finding employees to do the job, was our main issue and problem. So then Mr. McGough taught the class, and after he taught the class, he came back and he asked us to repeat the same exercise. And when it got back to me, I said, I am the problem within my own organization. It's not manpower, it's me. And so I really began to do some self-reflection as to why that is. So just to let you know a little bit about Valley Engineering, we are a full-service engineering firm. So we do mechanical, electrical, plumbing, civil, structural, land planning, surveying, transportation, and landscape architecture. So you can imagine during the downturn in the economy in 2009 and 10, things got really slow for us, and we really had to tighten down in order to just survive. And so there were a few years there where we were just basically kind of in a hold mode. And coming out of that in 2013, I didn't realize how risk-adverse I had become and really what a roadblock I had become to my own organization. So after hearing Mr. McGough's presentation, I decided then and there that I was no longer going to be the holdup within my organization, and we were going to make a big change. And so that's when we decided to institute this high-performance leadership program. And one of the things that I took away from that particular presentation was Mr. McGough said there are a lot of things that we cannot control, and there are some things that we can control. And so he asked me to identify what are some of the things that I could possibly control that might make my life less stressful. And so I identified being late. I had a problem with and I don't know why, really, just chronically being late for meetings. And I made a vow then to myself that I was not going to be late anymore. I was going to make a personal commitment. And we'll get into a little bit later why I did this, but so I get to the airport. This conference was in Naples, Florida. I get to the airport, and my husband calls me, and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm actually sitting at the gate." And he said, "Well, wait a minute, your flight's not for 2 hours." And I said, "Yeah, I've made this commitment to not be late anymore." He said, "Okay, let's see how long that'll last." That was in 2014. It's 2018, and I am happy to tell you that with the exception of a handful of times, I have not been late since then. So that tells you any impact that the speaker had on me, and the program that he presented is really what we based our program off of. So when you think about what culture is, and this slide basically says it's the people, the processes, the systems, and the structure within your organization. And how do you want to get to where you're going? And you can say, well, people need technical knowledge. Yes, they do need technical knowledge, but they also need culture. And by enacting culture, you enable people to be able to achieve the things that you want them to achieve. So we began this process, Valley Engineering began this process, and by identifying core values. And these can be anything to any organization, but it's just a matter of stopping. It can be within a small team, it can be within a department, but to stop and as a group, agree what your core values are. So these are just a few that we identified: trustworthy, accountable, professional, motivated, and responsive. And these were things that we decided were going to be really important when we began to talk about what our culture was going to be moving forward within Valley Engineering. So we began this training, and as you can see, this is actually the original whiteboard from the training sessions that we did. And so they start with numbers. We call them the primes, P-R-I-M-E-S. And we start basically saying, okay, so we have identified what our core values are. Now we're gonna start with what we call primes. So the number one prime, if you can see up there, is clearing. So that means when you come to a meeting, you're going to clear everything off your schedule and give your undivided attention to the meeting. So that's the person speaking, whoever's participating. So there's no cell phones, there's no interruptions, and so that's the first prime that we enacted. The second one is all the way to the right there, is all in all the time. So much like clearing, we ask folks to be engaged. And this is not just in the particular meetings for the high performance group. This is any meeting that you're in within your organization. So you're going to be all in all the time. So you're going to 100% be engaged and into the meeting or whatever your team or group is participating in at that time. Number 3 is what we call red dot. So in the middle there, you see 2 circles. You see extraordinary, available, and usual. Those 3 circles represent how we communicate as an organization. So the smallest circle inside is how we usually communicate. That's the people that we normally talk to on day-to-day. Available may be the people that you talk to who come and have questions, but you don't necessarily socialize with. And the extraordinary is when you reach out there, that's the outer circle of folks that you may not communicate with all the time or on a regular basis. But what the red dot moment is, and you can kind of see the red dot there, is putting yourself out there to be open to whatever the person in a meeting has to say that they can call you out anytime and say, okay, I want to have a red dot moment. And that's where, in that red dot moment, that's where extraordinary communication takes place. And I'll give you an example of how this sort of carries through to our organization today. So basically anybody within our organization can call anybody out at any time, as long as you preface it with a red dot moment. So I had a young man come and sit in my office one day, and I was sitting behind my desk. He was sitting in a chair directly across from me. I'm the general manager of my company. He was a team member, a drafter, and we were talking about a fairly intense topic, and I was communicating with him like I would normally communicate with anybody. However, I was sitting behind my desk, which I guess to him could be very intimidating, and he stopped me and he said, I need to have a red dot moment. And he said, I really feel like you're coming for me, and I feel very intimidated, and I'm not comfortable. And so I had to stop myself, realize where I was, the situation that I was in. And so we got up from my office, and we went into a conference room, and we sat down next to each other. We had the same conversation in the same tone. However, the circumstances were, the geography was different. So by merely having that red dot moment, he was able to take a situation where he might not be able to communicate well and flip it over into a situation where he was comfortable and we were able to solve a problem together. So that's really what a red dot moment is. And we have lots of red dot moments now at Valley Engineering, and they've identified a lot of problems, not only problems across the organization, but also problems amongst employees, each other, personal problems. They've been able to sort of rectify some of those things. Now, as I'm going through these, when you think about a culture, think about it as an ecosystem, so it's living. And so when we developed this high-performance group, we decided we were going to live our core values and we were going to live the culture. So the culture now is becoming, it's clearing, so we're clearing everything for meetings. It's all in all the time, being engaged. And now number 3, it's the communication. It's having these red dot moments. So number 4 in our culture was gossip. So gossip is the number 1 killer of employee morale. So, and what we simply ask folks to do is not engage in it. Not engage in it, nor should they be listening to it. And that's the best way. That's the best way to stop gossip, is just merely not to participate in that. Is that difficult at times? Yes, but it's also amazing the number of times that I've had somebody come to me and say, you know what, there was some gossip going on, and I said, red dot. We're not supposed to be talking about this, and they moved on. So there and again, living that culture. So we move on to number 5, all the way to the right over there, behavior we accept and behavior we do not tolerate. And in between those two are the culture. So again, being able to police essentially the culture that we're creating for our group. Move down to the bottom, that's integrity. So that's say equals do. So that means if you say yes to something, you really mean it. If you say you're going to do it, then you do it. Accountability. We have, within Valley Engineering, we had an issue with internal deadlines. Folks did not take internal deadlines very seriously. They struggled with them. However, external deadlines they were very, very good with. So that's one of the say, do primes that we really brought to internal deadlines. So, and if you can't meet a deadline, or you don't make the commitment to it, just simply say no. No, learn to say no, and it's okay to say no, even if it's a red dot moment. One of my favorite primes is what we call the 2B prime. So this prime you can use not only within your organizational culture, but you can also use it within your family culture or even within yourself. Basically, the B prime says if you're going to be a certain way, then you need to choose that path for yourself. Don't let somebody else be the driving force behind that. And here's a great example. So you're driving to work, and somebody cuts you off. They get off the same exit that you get off, and they slowly exit the highway. They stop in the middle of the road, and you can't get by them one way or the other. And so you're basically stuck there, and you're trying to get to work and be on time. So what happens in that moment? Most people are going to get angry. We hear the term road rage, but people are going to be angry by that. The point to that is if you're going to be angry, make sure that you're choosing to be angry, that the person in the car in front of you is not being the catalyst for you being angry. So if you've ever noticed that when those type of situations happen to you, 9 times out of 10, when you get to where you're going, you're very emotionally drained. Because what happens is your adrenaline gets kicked up, you get very excited, and then when you come back down, you feel emotionally exhausted. So the 2B prime for us says if we're going to waste or we're going to utilize the adrenaline, then use it for something that you understand and you understand why you're gonna be that way. So in that situation, if you want to be angry, but know why you're going to be angry. So acknowledge at the time that you're acting in a certain way. Pause and say, hey, this is how I'm being. Choosing that moment to either be that way or not. And it's amazing how many times that I've had people who have been having interactions at work, struggles at work, that have said, you know, in that moment I decided to be a certain way, and it really changed what I perceive as the outcome. Otherwise, I could have gotten really angry. I could have just disengaged. But instead, I chose how I wanted to be and acted in a certain way. And the outcome was much different than if I had really just let something trigger me. Feedback through caring. This next slide is actually a picture of cards that we all keep up at our desk. This one is taped to my monitor. But if you walk around Valley Engineering's office at any time, this will be at every single person's desk. It's something that we police heavily. It's something that we talk about a lot. And this prime basically is saying if you're going to say something, make sure that you say it and it's the right time to say it. So there are times in meetings where a lot of people do a lot of talking and very little listening. This prime lets people put that into perspective. So I'm just going to read this. So if it is not truthful and not helpful, don't say it. If it is truthful and not helpful, don't say it. If it is not truthful and helpful, don't say it. If it is both truthful and helpful, say it, but wait for the right time. Again, what we found within our organization is that as a group of very intelligent engineers, a lot of times folks were taking really cheap shots at each other, and they were it really became a game of sorts, and not a very comfortable game for some who did not like to participate in the back and forth. And when we started to dig down into really what our core values were, we realized that we didn't respect each other a whole lot, particularly in public settings. Everybody was kind of a smart aleck to each other, and there were people who were more comfortable with that than others. And so we just decided to take that off the table. And so we started this exercise within our management group, and there were 9 of us. And even within that small management group, we were known to really kind of go after each other in one-on-one settings or even in small group settings. And the dynamic changed completely when we instituted this prime and began to police it, because when we walked into our managers' meetings, everyone in that meeting knew they were safe. So whatever you said in that meeting, whether it was the person next to you thought it was good, bad, indifferent, you were going to at least be safe in what you were saying. They might disagree with you, but the way that they were going to disagree with you or the way they were going to approach you was completely different. And when we started to do that, even with our own small group, the group dynamic changed tremendously. We began to have much more prolific meetings in terms of the initiatives and the outcomes. We were able to develop better relationships with each other. We have a couple of husband-wives that work within our organization. The husbands are on the management team. The wives are actually engineers and drafters. And when the management team was going through this, I had both wives come to me and say, I don't know what you're doing in that management meeting, but my husband has changed, and he's changed for the better. And when we started the high-performance group training as a management group, it began to show not only to the spouses, but to the entire organization. And it got to the point where the entire organization was like, what are you guys doing? Because whatever you're doing is having such a significant impact that we want to be a part of that. And that's when we really decided that it was time to begin the whole process with the entire group. But this has been a big one for us, and like I said, there's everywhere, every single desk at Valley Engineering will have one of these to speak or not to speak cards. It's a prime that we, again, police a lot. So when you begin a high-performance group training, you will have a degree of people who are excited about it, a degree of people who think it's never going to happen, a degree of people who will begin to adopt it later, and some people who are just never going to get on board. And so this kind of shows that. So in this bell curve here, and excuse my poor drawing ability, so in the bell curve you can see you have 3% over there who are visionaries. Those are people who you can come in and say, we're going to make this fabulous change, and they're going to jump right on board. And that's great because you get at least a little bit of initial support. Then you have the early adopters. That's the 13% there kind of going up the bell curve. They acknowledge and they begin to invest. They're ones that they're like, seeing is believing. You have to begin to live the culture. You have to be able to see it. And then you have the 34%. They're the early adopters. Again, they're the ones who are kind of seeing things take shape, and they're like, yeah, this is. I want to be a part of that. I can see the positive impact it's having on our organization. The late majority are these people who realize that it's going to happen. They might as well get on board because they're being left behind. And then you have the last 16%, which is the laggards, and that's really what this prime is about. And we call this getting the right people on the bus and the wrong people off. When you begin to live a stated culture within your organization, people tend to show themselves as what they truly are, meaning if you decide whatever your core values are and your organization begins to live those, there are going to be people who are just simply not going to do that. And when that happens, those folks are going to stand out like a sore thumb. And what happens is those people can poison the rest of the organization if you leave them there. So if you have the majority of your organization who is leading this culture, utilizing and the high performance group training and policing it and participating, the percentage that are not, they probably need to be extracted from your organization. And this is a really tough one for us. We struggle with finding capable folks to do the work that we do. And so this was a hard one for us to acknowledge that we had some people who did not fit our culture. But we did acknowledge them, and we ultimately did lose a few folks, a few others through attrition. But ultimately now we do have a group now that is, there are no laggards on our team. And it's amazing how that feels. But again, it's a tough thing to do and to acknowledge. But again, the laggards will be poisoned because they will be always the ones who are talking that stuff doesn't work. I don't know why you believe that. That's never going to last. And they literally just they poison an organization, and so they have to go. And 9 times out of 10, the culture is not the only thing they're living. They tend to be they tend to have problems outside of that. Not to say that they're not high performers; they can be high performers. But my partner always says, I can teach you to be a good engineer, but I can't teach you to be a good person. And that's really the truth. The other thing about this is when we are hiring now, when we're interviewing, we now have an extra person sit in on the interview that talks strictly about our culture and what our culture is and how we live by that culture. And we really identify whether new hires or potential new hires are good fits for our organization. And there have been times where we said, they have everything that we're looking for, but I don't think they're going to be able to live, our stated culture, and they're not a good fit here, and we've had to pass on them. Again, that's a hard thing in times like these when you're trying to find good folks. But again, it really affects the entire organization when you when you have those laggards in your group. So the last thing you want to do is hire a laggard. So shortly after we did, the management group did the training, I actually was asked by an outside person. We have open enrollment every January, and we were talking about some of the things we're going to be rolling out for our high performance group. And one of the vendors there actually heard what we were talking about, and she said, you know what, I'd like to have more information on that. And so she said, I really would like to know how your management group, how you think it has impacted them. And so this is just two of our management group. They actually wrote down how they felt about the training that we had been doing. And I'm not going to read the first one to you, but I'm going to read the second one to you because I think it really impacts what a good culture can be within an organization. And this is Carl Snyder, who is the director of our civil engineering group. He said, I've noticed an increased level of efficiency, communication, and professionalism, not only internally, but with our clients as well. Many of the primes tend to resonate through our personal lives. The seminars provide the opportunity not to only become a better professional, but a better person. And again, so when you talk about, deciding, when you identify what your core values are, those core values are personal to you as well as to your organization. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be your own personal core values are going to be very similar to what you identify as your team's core values. They tend to run very closely together. So culture is a very hot topic now. You can find it in just about any magazine. It is kind of the cool stuff. However, particularly what I have found with engineering firms or technical disciplines in general is, culture is about the warm touchy-feely stuff, and technical people tend to think that those things don't matter, but those things matter tremendously. When you think that we spend the majority of our life with people that we work with, and we're social animals, we're social beings, and we rely on that socialization amongst each other to thrive. And when you can bring that to a point where people are, they know what to expect at work, they feel respected at work, they get along with their coworkers, what happens, it can be just amazing. And I can tell you that some of our folks my folks particularly, were very hesitant about it, about participating. But once we started teaching the classes, once they started to see the effect, they got on board. But what was really amazing is that in the end, the results were that the first year into our high performance group training, we increased our gross revenue by 25%. The second year, which was the second year we did the training, obviously, we increased our gross revenue an additional 25%. So, the return on investment on this training has been tremendous, and that is it's the soft skills, and those soft skills really do account for a lot within an organization. So one of my favorite quotes is up here at the top. Trying to close that out. Create a culture where people have a tremendous opportunity to be heard and ultimately for the truth to be told. I think within our own organization, that has been the highlight. Is we have been very high on initiatives. We've been very high on execution, innovation. The things that have come out of this high-performance group training have just been tremendous for us, and it's something that I love to share with others. And so this is my contact information. If anybody would like to follow up with me, please feel free to do so, and I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Connie. If anybody has questions for Connie, please type them into the chat box. We will wait patiently while you do so. Okay, questions we're getting here. You can talk about that one too. Let's see. Can you see that?
Yeah, this one says, can you tell me which book she referred to and the author? So Chris McGuff, M-C-G-O-F-F, the book, The Primes, and his new book is Fire in the Root Cellar. Do you think it is possible to create organization culture totally different from surrounding culture? I mean, different from market culture or your surrounding social culture? Yes. It starts with the individual, and then when I talked about for me not being late, there were other personal things introspectively that I decided to change, and people saw that immediately, and that gave validation to what we started as a group. And so what happened is it started with me, it went to our management group, and then it spread from there. So yes, I do think that you can. I do think that you can do that. How do you generate interview questions to draw out a person's natural culture? They're actually very conversational. So what we try to do is be as we share what our culture is, and we try to be very conversational about it. So and just pulling out their really their reaction to what that is. We identify what our core values are. We ask them what they think about those. We actually use a lot of intuition when it comes to interviewing, and I know that's not tangible and it can be difficult, but you know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, we originate as a single cell, and so our brain is attached to our gut, and so there's some of that we literally just depend on, you know, how we feel about a person. What percentage of personnel did you find resistant to change? We had, the first year, we let the training be optional, and we had all but one employee participate. So we basically had 99% participation within our organization. The next year, we actually made it mandatory, and again, at that point, everybody participated, but it's something that we still do to this day. We have lunch and learns every month, basically high-performance group training every month for our entire organization. Do you have a framework that you use? Yes, so I think it depends on, you need to decide really, you know, what you want to do within an organization. So for us, I specifically chose primes that related to some of our challenges. So if you identify your core values, I think that you can basically pull out some of the primes that would be most applicable to some of the things that you want to work on. Connie, how large is your organization? Connie, how large is your organization? Can this process to build a culture be scaled up or scaled down depending on the size of the group? Actually, yes. So I have consulted to a group with a group that is much larger than ours, and our group is 53. And but yes, I do believe that the other organization that I worked with, they were right at 275. So, and I believe it could be scaled down as well. So, but that's, you know, 53 is a fairly small group, but the 275 is certainly a larger group. Now, it was a different process with a larger group. I will tell you, it took a little longer. How do you identify who to bring in to conduct the training, or how do the internal staff prepare to teach a session? I teach all the sessions at Valley Engineering. We occasionally do have some of our management team will pick off a topic and teach on that. So, and how you would prepare, you know, you could, if you want to start with, you know, Chris McGough's book, The Primes, you could start there and develop your own training. That's what I did, and you know, specifically to our organization. So the other group that I consulted with, they were entirely different. They were actually an insurance agency. So I was able to sit down with them, kind of gather the information, and help them pick out some of the primes that were most applicable to their organization. You know, it starts with identifying your core values, basically saying what you think your culture is, what you want it to be, and then basically rolling that out and getting buy-in from there. Did your company use any team data or, say, an employee survey to get data on team members, employees, to see the employees' perspective of engagement to this process? Yes and no. We basically used word of mouth. Our group is small enough and quite frankly honest enough to say what they like and what they don't like. So when you think about the red dot moment, still to this day, when we have feedback sessions, one of the things we go through every year and say, okay, these are the things we're doing, these are the things we're doing well, these are the things that we should be doing, and these are the things that we should stop doing. The things that we're doing is always training. They want us to continue to do this training because it is so useful to them. So yes and no. We still have, it is optional training at this point, and right now we have 100% participation. So what opportunities?
One above it.
Okay. Are there other companies in your industry using the process of culture improvement? There are a lot of organizations, so architectural firms and engineering firms who are very interested in this. Interestingly enough, engineering is a male-dominated industry, and again, you're talking about this is the warm, the warm, feely stuff, and they don't want a kumbaya is the term. But what they can't ignore and what their leaders can't ignore are really the impact that it's had on our organization. When do you ever have a 25% increase, and then you have it again the next year? So those results are very hard to ignore. What opportunities did you give laggards to get on board before managing them out? So basically, we police our culture. So we gave them the opportunity in terms of generally a length of time. 9 times out of 10 for us, there would be a certain episode that would push them over the edge. So they were exhibiting laggard behavior, and there would be something that would kind of push them over the edge. So basically, we gave them the opportunity to participate in terms of getting on board, and that generally was a length of time. But when it came to a point where it started to interfere with other people in the organization, that's when we sort of managed them out. Can culture be changed without having the company leaders buying in the need to change, organic bottom-up culture change? Absolutely. So when you think about, it was very organic for me. So it starts with me within my organization, and it's spread to our management team. Now this is actually going down, but I do think that this could work from the bottom up as well. What happens is if you can engage a small team, even if it's at the bottom, to buy into this, what happens is other people see that you're happier, you're friendlier, you're more productive, and people want to be around positive people. So yes, I do think so. I think that you can have an impact to where your leadership begins to notice that you're doing something different, and it's working, and they want to be part of that.
Okay, it looks like that's the last question. We still have a few minutes here, so if you have a question for Connie, please go ahead and type it into the chat box. While we're waiting for that, I know because of the technical issues that we had for about the first 10 minutes getting things on here, we didn't talk anything about webinars coming up later this month. The next webinar after today will be on Thursday, February 22nd. That will be Advancing Quality Through Innovation, What's in Your Innovation Toolbox with Dave Verdon of C2C Solutions Incorporated. And then the last one for this month will be on Tuesday, February 27th. That will be Ensuring Supplier Social Responsibility with Jennifer Stepniowski, who's the Regional Director for North America with Pro QC International. And you did get one last question here about asking about a copy of your talk.
So I have that in PDF form. Is there someplace you can put that?
If you send it to me, we'll do a follow-up afterwards, as we do after each one of these, okay, where we provide them a link to the recording, a link to a survey to see how things went, and if there's anything that needed to be improved, okay, as we go forward. I can include the PDF as an attachment, if that's okay. And
feel free, anyone who wants to contact me, my contact information is up there, and that'll also be in the follow-up information as well. So please feel free to contact me. Just reach out individually if you'd like.
Okay. Let's see here. I think that's probably the last question we're going to get. Okay. Yep, we'll follow up with that one too.
Okay.
That's for me. I don't see any other questions coming in. We do have like 3 minutes before the top of the hour, so once again, I'd like to thank everyone for their patience at the start of the hour on the rough start. We're slowly getting the hang of it here as far as WebEx is concerned, and we did have a couple of other challenges that we needed to address too before we were able to get going, but we overcame those, and it looks like everything worked out pretty well. We will look forward to seeing many of you. It looks like several of you have already registered for a week from Thursday, so we will look forward to seeing you then. Until then, I'd like to wish everybody a good rest of the day. Thanks again for tuning in. Bye now.